Good day and welcome to my presentation on psychological aspects of sports and exercise presentation for behavioral aspects of sports, being taught by Dr. Garrett. The target population for the scientific study will be concentrated on the United States Marines' behaviors during pre-deployment exercises in lead up to pre-deployment for combat environments, also known as deployment readiness. The purpose behind choosing this population is that it is closely associated with supporting my husband, who has been in the Marine Corps for 20 years. And alongside him, I've been able to help mentor young Marines and also supporting him in pre-deployment exercises, but also being witness to those psychological behaviors of Marines that have surrounded our lives. The family environment that Marines can see themselves surrounded by during pre-deployment exercises is very limited, being that most Marines during pre-deployment exercises are either separated from their families just for this exercise, and then they reunite with their families before deployment for saying goodbyes and farewells, or in some cases they start their pre-deployment training completely detaching from their support unit, which is their family, and they do not see them until they return from their deployment. So they will go from that pre-deployment training straight to deployment to their combat zone and then return. This can bring on a feeling of isolation, which can lead to depression, negative behavior, and emotional instability. This is triggered by that sense of having that support unit and then having it feel like it's ripped away. But it also does promote inner strength for long periods of non-contact and developing the ability to compartmentalize, to focus on the mission. Therefore, separating that need to want to be around family. If you don't have it within reach, you can focus on the mission at hand. It does bring on highs and lows of behavior where most people can feel like they're on a high when they're working really hard on their mission, on their training, and then on a low when they're feeling bouts of loneliness when they're not training, or, in the evenings where they just want to talk to somebody. But this kind of training, because of this family environment that they're separated from their initial family, can bring on some camaraderie where your family ends up being the people you're surrounded by in your unit. It also builds psychological strength so that you stay present in the moment, especially in critical missions. And it promotes high focus on dangerous environments and surroundings. The social environment that Marines are exposed to during this pre-deployment training is that while the social environment is not specifically to like friends and family, it's limited mostly to only fellow Marines, because at this point you're working on unit strength, unit readiness. You're isolated from family and friends, but while you have no phone access and you're pretty much isolated from the world for days and weeks and months while deployed, but also sometimes weeks and months pre-deployment for this training, you can draw strength, familiarity, fun, friendships from those same Marines that you're surrounded by during that training. So it promotes that cultural camaraderie, that motivation, support, and determination, where some people don't have that in work industries or in sports. The Marines have an even closer unit where they depend on that person beside them at their front, at their back, at their rear to protect them, to have their back emotionally, psychologically, physically as well, especially when they go into a deployment zone where they have to have each other's back at all times. So it builds that brotherly, sisterlyhood foundation, and in a way it's a family away from family. Furthermore, the physical environment that these Marines are exposed to during this pre-deployment training is basically to expose them to what they would see in a deployment exercise, to teach their mind and their bodies to prepare for that outdoor terrain, whether it be in a desert terrain, mountains, forests, and to also just be ready to be able to be resilient in those staged hostile environments during training. So when they're in the real environment, they're not so shocked. To survive through environments which will test their physical mental strength. Imagine sitting out in the rain staging in a combat patrol where you're laying there just watching to see if the enemy comes across your path. You're soaking wet, you're cold, you're hungry, but you have to make sure that you stay mission ready, stay mentally strong, and not break from that position. That's the kind of training that these Marines are psychologically strengthening and physiologically strengthening their behaviors to be strict, disciplined, to be able to survive as a team and as a unit in places like Iraq and Afghanistan, which are like deserts and hot, but then they also go through ranges of snow and winters, and then through tropical rainforests like Asia and cold temperatures in Norway and heats in Africa. These sorts of environments can affect their motivation, the struggle to maintain health if they're struggling with hydration, they're sick with the flu, staying cool, staying warm, cleanliness because you don't have time to sit there and have a bath. And those work challenges, can play psychological warfare on your mind. Ultimately, those environments create multiple things. So motivation is either enhanced by that social environment where you're building that camaraderie with your Marines, even though you're away from your family, and decreased by that like a family environment. But those two kind of pair with each other where you're lacking that family environment. The motivation may be enhanced by that social environment with those Marines who you become close with like family. Stresses are enhanced by your physical environment because of that weather and the isolation from family and the need to achieve that mission readiness and standard. Anxiety is increased in training, that expectation to meet certain training levels to continue to work towards your goal of being able to deploy, but also being able to meet the standards required of you. This can come into question due to your abilities in the social environment where you see your Marines thriving, your fellow Marines thriving, you may be struggling with a task. That can build anxiety that you might not feel worthy or good enough. And then reinforcement is in both social and physical environments as each Marine supports each other to build skills and handle the tougher situations. You end up getting a lot more reinforcement from those people around you, which I believe is a positive thing in this particular environment. Next, we have processing goals. I chose a particular exercise that's very common to training for pre-deployment, and that is planning combat patrols. Marines will be expected to understand how to plan a patrol by the end of deployment training and be able to actually launch that patrol themselves, but then also conducting a combat patrol based off the plans they've created. The performance goals that they'll be expected to work on towards those process goals would be that Marine will be able to plan the combat patrol, factoring in route planning, prior movement in and routes, limited visibilities, and this obviously covering all those hazards that someone might involve. This decreases the anxiety that someone might be feeling. By creating a plan, you feel like you have more sense of control over the unknown and the known situations. The other performance goal would be that the Marine would be able to complete a combat patrol covering communications, which is the other aspect of the process goal 2, using unit accountability and mission plan execution. So they will be able to apply critical components to a live combat scenario that they would basically role play out during their pre-deployment training. Their outcome goals would be obviously to successfully complete that combat patrol plan, considering all those predictable and unpredictable situations, factoring in all the action orders that would need to be required to follow. That's orders not just for themselves, but for the people involved in that patrol plan. So all the units that have different components, different Marines standing at different points, so that sense of responsibility also can come in there. This all comes and plays into that role of behavior of being able to plan out these kinds of missions to protect the people around you. This all plays a role, psychologically component on somebody. It reflects on their behavior as a leader, reflects on their ability to achieve that goal. An outcome goal would be to execute that combat patrol with the precision to order and adequately record status, position reports, handling enemy contact, and adjusting to the unpredictable circumstances. Lastly, we have the strategy goals. So in order to reach these goals, we'd like to practice them. So practice creating a plan twice a day a week. That way it's still fresh in your mind. It's like practicing over and over and over to achieve, not perfection, but achieve the need to complete it right. not without losing components, and effectively giving evidence of your research to assess by an officer who will review your work. And then process performance goal would be that the Marine would need to plan a combat control patrol factoring in routes, plans, and they would do this with variations between day and night during the week. The outcome goal would be to successfully complete that patrol plan and be predictable, but by also showing different scenarios of that plan. So not just one style of combat patrol, multiple, because we have different terrains, different environments, we have different elements we need to combine. And then the second strategy goals we would be for the conducting the combat patrol. So the Marine would need to conduct drills twice morning, twice in the afternoon, twice in the evening. So you're exposed to all different elements of environment, stresses, weather elements. So we know what kind of combat patrol environments we could encase. The Marine needs to complete a combat patrol covering communications. So they would need to lead the combat patrol drills through comms instead of being there physically, so that we can understand that you won't always be there. You may just be in their ear the whole time. And conveying that knowledge to that unit accurately and clearly and leading that unit. And then the other outcome goal would be the Marine would need to execute this with precision. Therefore, they would need to do full 4-hour combat scenario assessments at the end of the week in review to assess that they've successfully been able to obtain the information to create these combat patrols, and execute them effectively through all these steps in training. The mission statement that I'd like to ensue or thrive off in my future, my career, is: fear thou not, for I am with thee. Be not dismayed, for I am thy God. I will strengthen thee, yea, I will help thee, yea, I will uphold thee with the right hand of my righteousness. Isaiah 41:10. This is basically me, that I will be the strength that will guide you, and I'll be your right hand in righteousness through all your struggles and the things you plan to overcome in life. And what I've learned in this class, that I've benefited from this class immensely, is the psychological behavior effects, not just an ability to be positive and negative minded set when trying to achieve a goal, but how they affect both your mind socially and environmentally surrounding, and inversely absorbing internally, thus creating a domino effect for overall performance in the individual. Thank you for this presentation, and I appreciate everything you've come to learn.